Hi there everyone, this is Adrien, the exercise specialist from the Leduc, Beaumont, Devon Primary Care Network. I hope you all are doing well today. Sorry there's been a bit of lack of videos lately, but we are back and we're going to be more consistent. For today's video, I see I'm here in my office. I'm not in my gym today. I wanted to go over on kind of an interesting concept for kind of soft tissue and some joint injury rehab, and kind of how research has more recently changed and kind of shaped what was a previously kind of well known and well accepted concept. And I don't think that these new recommendations have really been pushed to the public quite enough yet. And I think that that they could be very helpful for everyone. Obviously, if you have any injuries, you want to be assessed by your healthcare professional, either your doctor, physical therapist, so on and so forth. But there are generally some basic tenets that everyone can try to follow for certain types of injuries, things like joint sprains, ankle sprains, wrist sprains, so on and so forth, different knee sprains, so on and so forth. Even some soft tissue stuff like some actual muscle injuries. These can often be helpful as well. Things like strains and sprains and all that. If we get into the talk of recovering from surgical interventions and things like that, these will change a little bit, but in my opinion, not overly. And I think how things go based on these new kind of parameters, or newish parameters, as opposed to what's been said in the past, I think is very helpful. So everyone has probably heard of the concept of RICE. So as we see here, let's make sure everyone read that. So the acronym RICE, as you can see, stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So that's often the parameter that is used for basic type of joint and some soft tissue rehab, right? So our rest, so if you injure something, let's use an ankle for kind of all these examples, because it's a nice, easy example for this. So let's say you sprain your ankle. First thing you want to do is you want to rest it. You want to get off it, so on and so forth. Second is ice. They recommended ice to help reduce the swelling, reduce the pain, so on and so forth. Compression, similar with the ice component of it, where we're trying to reduce the swelling by actually compressing the actual joint. And the elevation, you want to try and keep the joint that is affected kind of above your heart and elevated, so that gravity can help to pull the blood and pull the fluids and the swelling out, so on and so forth. So all these are very much, kind of reducing swelling, so on and so forth. And RICE has been around for, probably since at least the 70s. And it's kind of been the most widely kind of understood and expected method for rehab for these kind of things. Even people that do not work in the field have usually heard of RICE if you've done some kind of activity, and that tends to be what is always recommended. Working in the field and working with people, I'm sure I am not the only one who realizes that RICE leaves a lot to be desired, and has not been kind of the best method for recovery and for rehab for a lot of these kinds of soft tissue injuries or joint injuries, so on and so forth. Some of the ideas behind RICE at the time were very solid, and some of them are still utilized moving forward, but the concept of RICE itself is very lacking. So we needed a new acronym. And a lot of people, from the physical therapy world, which you can find online, have come up with a new acronym. It's a little longer, I'd say just as catchy, but I'm in full support of what this acronym actually stands for, and the premise behind it. And that acronym is, as you can see there, peace and love. So peace and love is a new acronym. Is a new acronym that we are going by. I've covered up what each of them mean, because I'm gonna go through them one at a time. If I was to just reveal all of them, it can be a little overwhelming. So I'm gonna briefly go into each one, where they come in, why they are there, rationale, so on and so forth. So first one, is, if I get this ready here, is protection. So protection, obviously, let's say that you're dealing with a sprained ankle or even a broken limb, so on and so forth. Let's say you break your arm or something. Protection. So we want to support the joint in that the joint or the affected area in the initial stages of recovery. So that's where a cast comes in, a tensor bandage comes in, so on and so forth. We want to support and we want to protect the area to stop it from getting injured further and elicit a lot of pain in those initial stages of recovery immediately post instant that actually caused the issue. Secondly, we have elevation, which was also in rice. So elevation is still a great idea. Try and raise the actual joint above your heart, and so that gravity is able to help pull things down and pull things away. Very important. Third on the list, which a lot of people might find this one surprising, is to avoid anti-inflammatories. Now, I'm not going to be one that will tell you to never take an anti-inflammatory. There are plenty of situations where an anti-inflammatory can be helpful. But what a lot of research is starting to show is that consistent and chronic anti-inflammatory use, it might help reduce the actual inflammation in the area, but it actually slows the actual healing rate and the actual recovery rate on the whole. So something to be mindful of. Next is compression. So once again, just like in rice, compression. If we can secure the injured area, with like a tensor bandage or something tight to help keep the swelling, kind of at bay, and keep the joint or the affected area, more supported and structurally sound, helps with healing. So next one on the list, which is another new one here, the second E, which is for education. So one point that I think a lot of healthcare providers, some healthcare providers anyway, need to work on being better at is educating a patient or educating yourself with your injury. Oftentimes I would always say, well, I do always recommend seeking a healthcare professional to be educated on these things, to make sure that you're getting the right information, as sometimes going on to Google isn't the best way to learn about what you're actually going through and actually discuss and figure out what's actually accurate information. So being educated on kind of your injury is an incredibly beneficial type of thing. So you learn kind of exactly how the joint works, what has happened to it, and the rationale why certain recovery methods are being used. So you're just aware and able to play an active role in your recovery. So that is the peace part of it. So protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, and education. Now we move on to the love portion of it. So this is where we get into the exciting stuff. Load. The L in love is for load. So what does that mean? So loading a joint or loading an injured area once it is able to be loaded is incredibly important in the recovery and the rehab and the overall health of the tissue affected. Once again, going back to our sprained ankle example, we use crutches in those situations early on as those are there to take the load off of the joint, which you do need to take load off of a joint in the initial stages usually, because a load is not going to help things and it's going to be really painful, so on and so forth. But load is very important for the recovery and for the long-term health of a joint or the affected area. We want that load because we want to keep all of the tissues, like the ligaments and the muscles and the tendons, everything in the area that has been affected, as healthy and as strong as possible. One of the biggest issues with injuries long term when we lock up a joint or an affected area and we don't use it is the atrophy and the degradation of all of the tissues in the area. Loading helps to keep all those tissues strong and healthy as possible. We want those to be as strong and healthy as possible for as long as possible, and we want to return you to the ability to use that joint as effectively as possible, as soon as possible. And load is how we is one major way how we construct that. So for an ankle, for example, as soon as we are able to get you weight bearing to like even a slight extent, that is fantastic. So if we can weight bear you slightly, so you're using a little bit of your weight on that ankle, just so all the muscles and ligaments and tendons in your foot are still able to support, that's going to be fantastically helpful. And even prior to that, using things like, you know, a TheraBand and doing some ankle rehab movements, that's all also an incremental form of load. And we want to increase that load as your symptoms, you know, improve, in order to help your tissues be as healthy as possible. So very important. So the O, what is the O for? Most people will never guess this one. Optimism. So optimism. Oftentimes when anyone gets injured or hurt or is recovering from something, we can get, you know, a little bit low, you know. We're always like, you know, why did this happen to me? You realize how much it affects your life, so on and so forth. Research shows how being optimistic in your recovery and you know, being motivated and focused on your recovery, people that are like to have significantly better recovery outcomes overall. So it's obviously tough, and none of us like to be injured, but it can be an incredibly powerful thing to try and be optimistic for your recovery. So next on the list, the V, vascularization, a big fun word. So what is vascularization? Vascularization is the ability to, in this context anyway, increase the blood flow into an area, to help bring in kind of all of the healing factors and so on and so forth. So why is vascularization important? With a lot of these kind of strains and sprains and things, once again using the ankle for an example, if we're able to, you know, get blood into the area and then pull it out, and then get new blood in there and pull it out, there's like a pumping effect per se. You know, and it's a pumping and a flushing, It's bringing in healing factors, and then we remove inflammation. We bring in healing factor and we remove inflammation, so on and so forth. And it's a very important tool. And the more we're able to keep a joint, vascularized, usually the faster and the better that it will heal to an extent. That's often why people wonder why things like, a meniscus and things like that takes so long to heal. One of the major reasons is because there's not a lot of actual blood flow to the area possible. So vascularization, very important. And what is the final one? What is this last E? Obviously, exercise, which encompasses a lot of these, obviously, but the final stage is exercise, and that's kind of your overall recovery, right? That's your entire rehab protocol from initial onset onto full return to kind of pre-injury abilities if possible, right? So that's rehab, that's performing all of your daily activities. Personally, I'm under the opinion that you're not fully recovered from, for an injury, so we use an ankle sprain, until you're able to fully use that ankle, and there's no physical limitations, and you also don't think about any limitations when you are using it. That is what I use for a full recovery. So overall, we see peace and love, protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, education, load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. So that's what we are using now instead of rice. So a little bit longer of an acronym, but far more supported by the research. One thing that I do want to show on this is I take my marker here. If we go like this, my really professional pointer. So one great thing about this acronym that rice does not show is that this acronym is progressive in nature in general and can be used from kind of the initial onset to recovery. So when you initially injure something, we're up here and we're dealing with protection, elevation, avoiding anti-inflammatories, compression, and education. So this is the initial onset of an injury and early on in your recovery progress. As you start to progress further, that's when we start to worry about load and the exercising and the vascularization and things like that. Optimism, definitely you want to be up here with that too. That's a little bit less, concerning overall then, but Peace and Love works progressive in nature with injuries and the recovery protocol. So when you're first injured, things are starting up here. As you're progressing, you will work your way down this list. And once we start to get into here, we're loading, we are vascularizing, we're focusing on exercise. That's when we are really helping someone go from that initial onset of an injury, and we're progressing, towards, full functionality, hopefully, and a full return to, pre-injury levels of ability. So, Peace and Love, it's an awesome acronym. It's far better than the RICE principles that we've been using in the past. RICE has its place sometimes, but it leaves a lot to be desired on the whole. And the Peace and Love concept is a much more scientifically sound and supported method on the whole for a pretty good deal of injuries. So something to keep in mind. Once again, always see your healthcare professional about any injuries. Don't just think that now that you know about Peace and Love, I can recover from anything on my own. This is just an overlaid kind of an acronym. There's the specifics in there, specific exercises and intensities, and timelines and protocols of each. So you need to see a proper healthcare professional for all of that. Well, I hope you guys found it all helpful. Once again, my name is Adrien. I'm the exercise specialist at the Leduc Beaumont Devon Primary Care Network. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down below. Please like and subscribe to our clinic's YouTube channel, and have a great day.